Welcome, everyone. I'm Jan from Gnosis Guild. Gnosis Guild is a small team incubated at Gnosis, but now working independently. And yeah, our interests and expertise is centered around research, design, and implementation of on-chain organizations, governance, access control systems, and trust-minimized applications. We are probably best known as stewards of the Zodiac open standard for modular DAO tools. And as of today, more than 150 on-chain entities utilize our modules, safeguarding more than 2.5 billion in assets. Working in the space of DAOs and looking at on-chain organizations of today led us to a somewhat dissatisfying conclusion. Most DAOs operate trustfully or inefficiently. It's inefficient to have a top-level vote on every single action. That's why most DAOs delegate certain responsibilities to a smaller group of people. And this is generally a good thing, as it's much more efficient for decision-making. However, it also means that a small group of people has broad control over the DAO. And it's this dilemma that we see a lot of organizations struggle with. In many cases, they even get the worst of both sides, like they overwhelm token holder attention through some form of decentralization theater, while in the end it's actually a bunch of people on the multi-sig who are in control. So for today I thought, let's learn from and look at one of the few DAOs that actually are successful, that do it right, ENS, the Ethereum naming service. It's governed in a truly decentralized fashion while still operating effectively. And to understand how they do it, I thought I'd briefly walk you through the history. The ENS project was started in 2017 by Nick and Alex from the Ethereum Foundation, but the ENS DAO really only came to life in 2021 with an airdrop to over 100,000 eligible addresses. And everyone claiming that airdrop chooses a delegate. And a delegate is a community member you trust to represent your opinion in governance. Then governance happens through two forms of proposals. There are proposals for social consensus on Snapshot, and anyone with a total delegated voting power of 10K ENS is allowed to post them. So this mechanism mainly serves to weed out spammers. But then to actually execute stuff, you need to submit an executable proposal, and the bar for that is higher, 100K ENS with a quorum of 1 million. Since it would be asking a bit too much from delegates if they have to pay attention to every single action the DAO takes, the ENS DAO, shortly after the airdrop, already introduced working groups. And working groups allow decisions to be made and funds to be distributed without being passed by the DAO through an executable or social proposal. Each working group has 3 stewards, and these stewards are elected for a 6-month term. And then the working group can request funding from the DAO and spend these funds at their own discretion. In order to stay long-term sustainable, even in the face of a long bear market with low name registration income, the ENS DAO in March last year formed the ENS Endowment. And the idea here is to set aside a substantial amount of the DAO's treasury to generate yield from DeFi investments. And these investments are actively managed in order to reduce risks. This requires control over a much broader share of the DAO treasury compared to what a working group would usually request. And this brings us back to the conundrum mentioned earlier. So we need a small group of fund managers that are in control and able to move quickly, but in order to react to market or risk events. But if we have this group, they can, of course, also do other things. So do we really want to trust such a small group of people with such a major part of the DAO's treasury? The answer to this conundrum lies in the Zodiac roles modifier. Our roles mod is an on-chain permissions module for smart accounts. It allows on-chain entities to extend secure transaction permissions to any address through customizable roles, allowing member addresses to act on behalf of the account. So why do we call it a modifier? It's a module you can enable on your account, but why do we call it a modifier? In our Zodiac design system, we have three kinds of building blocks. At the bottom, we have the smart account, so the thing that holds all the assets and that you actually want to control. And on top of that, you can enable modules, other smart contracts, enhancing the account functionality. And then there's this special class of modules we call modifier. And these modules are special in that they expose the avatar interface again, meaning you can enable other modules and stack other modules on top of them. So looking at the ENS endowment setup, they basically spun up a fresh safe to hold all the assets earmarked for investments. And this safe is fully owned by the DAO, meaning it can only be controlled through executable proposals. But then they equip the safe with the roles modifier. And on top of the roles modifier, we can enable other accounts to act as role members. So the treasury management team, they use their own safe to interact with the different DeFi protocols on their day-to-day operations. And this safe gets enabled, and a role called manager is assigned to it. A new role in the roles mod generally starts with no access whatsoever. So as a next step, we need to define the permissions for the role. Role permissions can be as broad as allowing all calls to a given target address, or you can scope a target to allow role members to only call to selected functions of that contract. And sometimes you might even want to enforce certain restrictions on how to call a function, like the allowed parameter values that a function may be called with. And for that, the roles mod brings a powerful system of conditions. So conditions allow you to basically define the acceptable field values in call data. And for that, you have a range of expressions, like logical expressions allow you to define combinations, like to enforce certain combinations of parameter values, or to allow multiple different variants of calling to a function. And we even have complex expressions allowing you to drill down to nested tuple fields or to enforce restrictions over elements of an array. And finally, conditions also allow you to tie in allowances. And allowances are a mechanism to enforce rates and limits. So each allowance is centrally defined on the roles mod and carries these fields of information. Refill is the amount by which the allowance is topped up for each period until it reaches the max refill threshold. And the period just defines the duration of that refilling interval. The balance field tracks the current allowance balance, so it is increased for each period and decreases with usage. Once defined, you can consume allowances through conditions. And for this, we have three different condition expressions. Using a within allowance expression, you can apply an allowance on a parameter field. So this works for uint type parameters. And as a role member makes a call through the role, the observed value of that parameter will be checked against the current allowance balance. If it fits, the call passes and the allowance balance will be reduced by the observed amount. If not, the call would be rejected. And in a similar fashion, you can also enforce allowances on the Ether value sent with transactions, or you can also restrict like the call rates, like how often a function may be called in each period. So with this general overview of the roles mod's capabilities, let's come back to the setup for the ENS DAO. I thought I'd walk you through the process of actually setting up these permissions based on an example of a fresh new role. So the idea here is to make the operations of the treasury managers more efficient by automating certain repetitive tasks, such as claiming rewards from liquidity positions. And for this purpose, we want to define a new harvesting role and assign this role to a bot and this bot could then, on a daily basis, automatically claim the accumulated rewards from different DeFi protocols to make them available for reinvestments and compounding returns. So how do we do this? How do we configure this role? A good starting point is our permission starter kit project that you find on our GitHub. And with a click on this button, you can copy this template into your own GitHub account to start your own permissions repository. Once you clone this repository and open it in a local editor, you can start working on it. And the first thing you do is basically opening the included contracts file. And in this file, you can just paste all the contract addresses you want to allow role members to call. So the ENS DAO holds positions on Uniswap v3. So we include the positions NFT contract. And they also use Compound, so we add the Comet rewards contract, which distributes rewards to lenders and borrowers on Compound. And you can basically choose whatever structure you like for this file. So this is really just meant to label and organize the contract to be able to refer to them in the next step when defining permissions. So defining permissions happens in the roles permissions file. And you can simply add a new entry to it by typing allow, and you would see the editor automatically suggesting you the contract entries that we defined before. So here we select the Compound Comet rewards contract, and it would then start suggesting the functions of that contract. So we can select that we want to allow the claim function, effectively allowing role members to claim accumulated compound rewards back into the endowment safe. Already before, we've added an entry for the Uniswap collect function. And if we look at the parameters of that function, we can see that there's a recipient field. And we don't want the bot to be able to claim rewards to any other address than the ENS endowment safe, because if the bot's private keys got leaked, this would open the doors for anybody to steal accumulated rewards. So what we can do here is set a condition on the recipient field. So in this case, we force it to be equal to the avatar address. So all calls with a different address would be rejected. So with these permissions in place, the next step is applying them to the actual roles mod we deployed for the ENS DAO. And this happens by running a simple command, the command apply, followed by the identifier of the role and the address of the roles modifier. By running it, this would open a browser window, taking us right to the Zodiac Roles app inside the ENS endowment safe. And this gives us an overview of the configuration updates that we are applying. So basically, provides a comparison view of the permissions we just defined in code, comparing them to the conditions that are, permissions that are currently configured on chain. And if we scroll down on this page, we find an execute button, or we can just simply copy the transaction payload and post it as an executable proposal on Tally. And once this proposal passes and the DAO confirms these permissions, we could launch our harvesting bot and do even more efficient treasury management in the future. Just like ENS, we have a couple of other DAOs using the roles mod for trust-minimized treasury management. So we have Gnosis DAO, Balancer, Cow Protocol, and this list is steadily growing. But the roles mod is also useful for other use cases. In fact, every single transaction you make with your Gnosis Pay credit card goes through a roles mod. It's the component that allows the card payment settlement service to withdraw Monerium euros from your safe without having any other control over it. And also the roles mod's allowance mechanism is used to enforce the card's daily spending limit. So with that, I hope I could give you a glimpse of the powers and possibilities enabled by the roles mod. It really is a foundational primitive for on-chain permissions, and we hope that it will inspire new access control patterns. For example, instead of every protocol building their own flavor of delegation, we could have apps propose role configuration to extend strictly scoped permissions to some delegate address. And in this spirit, we hope that roles opens up the space for play and experimentation and for new ways of interacting with our decentralized systems. Yeah, the best place to get started is roles.gnosis.guild.org, and yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us on our Discord. We are always happy to help and support you on the journey. And I think we have maybe time for one question, not sure.
Yeah, we have time for questions for sure. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to ask anything? Anyone? Okay, I think, no, really. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Jan Felix Schwarz.